As you're probably hearing right there, we're recording this session. So if you like what you see and you want to share it with others in the organization, we'll be getting you a link for that. I'm real excited about the session today. For those of you that are first timers, keep an eye open. We do something every month. We're also looking for topics, right? So if you've got folks that you'd like to have join a session like this, we'll get you the links to previous ones. But also if you have a topic you'd like to see later this year, go ahead and let us know, and we'll look to get it on the agenda. So again, my name is John Manna, part of CDW's business development team, and I'm excited to introduce our speakers today, led by Doc Burnham, who's part of CDW's.
John, somehow you just clicked back onto mute.
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Mike, for the reminder. But I'm going to turn the mic over to Doc. By the way, if you've got questions during the session, there's a Q&A panel on your right side. Please go ahead and put your question in there. If we can answer them on the fly as things go, we will. We might batch some for the end. And if we don't get to your question, we'll absolutely follow up with the answer afterwards. Last note before I give you the mic, Doc, is you may see a poll pop up a couple of times during the session. It'll be on the right side as well. Please answer it right away. It only stays open for like 45 seconds. But if you answer it, you'll be part of the data we share live during the session, and we'll watch Doc and the team kind of react to that and kind of weave it in as well. So on that note, Doc, it's all yours.
Hello, I'm Doc Burnham. I'm the ITAM practice manager here at the ServiceNow Solutions side. So I work with a lot of our teams here on what we do for the sales teams, delivery teams, and all. You can read this slide. I have a lot of history on how do we do asset management throughout its life cycle. And to go along with me, I've got Clayton. I'll let Clayton introduce himself there.
Yeah, howdy everyone. Clayton Berry out of Overland Park, Kansas. I'm the technical partner with Doc. I'm more of the hands-on implementation coding side of the house. Spent a number of years at ServiceNow, spent a number of years helping to manage data centers, things along those lines. So a lot of background in this space as well.
So then what we're going to do is we're going to discuss what SaaS is, how it works, how it impacts your organization. That you will also see a poll question coming up on your screen here, and it may be on my screen too. So I'll get it off my screen. So we want to discuss what SaaS is. And again, we always hear this term. We may or may not know exactly what it means. So the first thing we want to get is a basic definition. It is, software as a service. It's a way and a manner of how we deliver software. It's usually through a cloud provider that hosts the applications, and then we use it over the internet or a web browser, internet, cloud, all of those terms for it, versus having our organizations actually manage and host it internally. So that's the main thing for it. Now, you will also hear that it is part of cloud computing. And part of cloud computing, besides SaaS, you've got infrastructure as a service. And you also have platform as a service to do different things. So this is one of them. And when we look at this, we're going to see that SaaS is out here. Everyone has SaaS applications. Right now, I'm looking at the polls there, and I'm seeing that some people have more than 50 apps. Some people have 10 to 30, that type of setup. Well, in 2021, the average was 80 different applications, SaaS applications that are being used by organizations. Now, of course, depending on if you're a small or a large organization, but you have those. So we have over 80 of them out there. It's also said that from the estimates in the industry that in 2024, we're going to have more than a $200 billion market for SaaS apps. They're out there and we constantly see them. So if you haven't seen some of them, you're going to see them, and manage them is critical. Now, other things with this, and I'll take this one here. There are different types of SaaS apps. You have your common ones, which are web-based only. And then you also have hybrid ones, which are web-based and on-premise. Now your web-based ones, like Smartsheets, Salesforce, ServiceNow, you only see them on the web. Your hybrid ones, the biggest ones that we run into, Microsoft Office 365, misspelled that, and Adobe Creative Suites that we see, because they also have those not only on the web, but they're also installs on your devices, your physical devices. That way you can see those, so we can pick them up a different way when we're trying to manage those. But one of the other terms that we run into all the time is a classification of the SaaS apps. We have vertical ones and horizontal ones. Now, our vertical ones, those are more solution-based or industry-based. They're looking on a simple or a specific solution that they're trying to do, niches in the industry or something. They're not looking for a broad-based environment for it. We see a lot of them in insurance is an easy one. You may have some that say they're dental insurance or health insurance or workman's comp, those type, versus all insurance. Now, the opposite of that would be the horizontal. They're looking for a wide range of customers. These are the ones that you see all the time out there. Office 365 is a productivity one. It wants as many customers across multiple industries or verticals or anything else that are out there. Same thing when you get for accounting software like QuickBooks or CRM software, which is Salesforce. Those are ones that are looking for a broad-based environment. So that's why they're horizontal. So that's what we end up with a lot of times when we talk about SaaS. And of course, you can see various logos there off to the right-hand side of the slide. Those are some of the most common ones that are in the environment today that we're used to seeing. Okay, Clayton.
Yeah, so talking about the different types of SaaS environments, and sometimes there's a gray area, and so you really have to look at how you're using it. Now, everybody's very familiar with the traditional on-site. This is the applications that you purchase. This is how Microsoft used to be years ago. You'd purchase a license for Microsoft Office, you would install it on the local desktops, you'd manage it through SCCM, for example. But then, things became more infrastructure as a service, and this was very broad brush. This allows you to build your applications, to manage your data, and we've got the major players here. You've got AWS, you've got Azure, Google, Oracle, all offering infrastructure as a service where you basically rent infrastructure so you don't have to manage your own data center. Taking that a step further, we got to platform as a service. And the real difference here is the platform provides constructs to easily bring together applications that are of your own creation, but yet still not have to worry about providing some of those core backbones. Whereas infrastructure as a service, you may have to install your own database, whereas platform as a service, the database and all the constructs around managing it, reporting, analytics is already provided there. And then lastly, we got SaaS, as we've been talking about, software as a service, where it's trying to provide everything for you, where you truly are just getting it as an application. But some of these examples I've already given, Salesforce is a great example. It could be classified as software as a service, especially if you're using their CRM. CRM is a pre-built canned application that they're providing through the web. But the Salesforce platform allows you to build your own custom applications as well. And so ServiceNow is very similar as well. They provide ITSM applications and HR applications, but you're also able to build your own applications. And so that's when the area can get a little gray between SaaS and PaaS. And it's really, as far as classifying it in your own environment to manage it and report it appropriately, it's really looking at how are you using this? How are you managing that platform and what makes the most sense for you?
Now, every time when we're talking about SaaS, there's always pros and cons of that. Advantages versus disadvantages. Here's a list of the common ones that you hear when we're talking about the cost side of things. Obviously, one of the pros for SaaS is it helps us lower the cost, meaning because you don't have to buy all of the licenses up front, flexible payments, and you can put them against operational expenses versus capital expenses. And it gives you that flexibility in there. Now, accessibility. If it's a SaaS app, since it's web-based, you don't have to worry about a lot of the hardware restrictions. You can use it on Windows, you can use it on Mac, you can use it on mobile, all of these different ones, because it's web access. And all of them are getting to see the same code. So that means it's more accessible to them. And we always like the scalability because, again, one of the things that SaaS is known for is on demand. So if you only need 10 licenses today, you have it. But if you need to surge that and have 100 licenses tomorrow, it allows it to automatically scale up to that. So that way you can meet those requirements. And then when it goes back down, you can scale back down because it's a on demand, or a lot of times it's just usage based. Now, one of the biggest advantages of the SaaS side is the reliability, because like the other slide showed, it had in there that it is on site. The organization has to maintain everything, the servers, the support, all of that. Well, one of the things for the reliability on this aspect is that's the provider has to provide this information and all the support for it. So you have their back end. So you're not doing the servers, the data backups, all of those. And it's got an uptime usually of 4 nines, what they always turn around, because it's more reliable. But the other things that we use SaaS for is we get a faster ROI. We need an application to turn it out there, put it in to be able to use this. So we can do that quick. We also can get no development team on the application. We know what the application's already going to do. So its function is out there. It's just who's going to have access to it. And of course, the latest version of it. That's one advantage of it. That can also be a disadvantage of it because you may need an older version. But in most cases, it's an advantage because you've got the latest version of that software. Now, the big disadvantages of SaaS is security. Everyone is worried about our security side, whether it's data or access. So it's your data that's being out there on the SaaS app. How do you access it? How do you control it? How do you know that? That's one of those questions, because if that provider gets hacked or compromised, then your data is out there. So we look at that also. Who has access to it? One of our biggest issues on all of SaaS is we forget to remove users that actually have access to it, whether they've been, off-boarded from the company, but we forget to take their access away from the software. So they still may have access to it. So we're looking at those. And we need to make sure we control that. Management, loss of control. Since it's so easy to, acquire it, all you need is a credit card to put it out there, you can get it. We see a lot of these where IT manages a bunch, and then you have a lot of non-IT manage. The business units, they will manage all these. The business units need something, they will do it outside of IT. So IT doesn't know that they exist. So that affects some of the licensing, how they bought the licenses, do they get volume licenses, discounts, those type of things. Plus, IT can't manage what they don't understand. Now,
I'll just interject here real quick, Doc, because this is something I've seen on more and more projects I've been working on lately, is we're going out there, and especially with the really easy ones, the AWS, the platform as a service, we'll go in, multiple departments will have their own contract, their own access to AWS. They'll be spinning up their own environments, and none of the departments will be even remotely aware that those even exist. And so then it becomes a collapsing. How do we bring all this together? How do we manage that? But that's something we're seeing more and more. And so I'm actually curious, if anybody wants to throw a conversation out there in the Q&A, those of you that, put 10 to 30 when we're saying that the average is 80 these days, how much confidence do you have in your organization that there aren't other departments out there with their own contracts that you may not even know about?
Yeah, and one of the other things with that, we're seeing a lot of organizations where individuals will go out there and license Adobe. That's an individual license, which is not supposed to be used for company, organizational type setups. So we are seeing that all the time out there, especially when we're bringing the licenses together. Some of those licenses do not transfer over, or in some cases, there's issues where they created it on a personal account versus a business account. So issues with licensing and that type of setup. Now, our other problem we run into a lot is interoperability. How do we exchange data between all these different SaaS apps? They're SaaS, so they're easy to do this, they say. Well, a lot of times we'll end up between a version of a software from one version to the other version. It won't transfer over correctly for it. Or how do we get it from one SaaS app, that same data, over to another SaaS app, moving the data back and forth? And then the one that we all hate the most is if you go away from one SaaS vendor to another SaaS vendor, what's the cost? Can we get all of our data from that SaaS or old SaaS vendor to move it over to our new SaaS vendor? So that is one of those interoperability issues that we run into. And like I said, it's all about, wow, how do we exchange the data between those? Then in some cases, the rather ones that you see there is contractual. If you signed a 3-year contract and it doesn't work, you still have that issue with, you still have to pay the contract, those type of things. Now, the one that affects us that we don't like to see is, and you've seen this in the news on various occasions over here, performance is out of your control. Microsoft has an issue with Office 365, so your email doesn't work or anything else. That's beyond your control because it's a SaaS app. You don't control that. And we see that on different aspects of it out here. So those are disadvantages of it. So there's a lot of advantages, but there are also some disadvantages. And how do we handle those disadvantages to take them away from being just a disadvantage to business as usual so we can work with those? These are just some of the challenges that we got. And Clayton's already mentioned some of these here for it, identifying which applications or products are in your environment, because IT knows what IT knows. It's just the non-IT managed that's causing a lot of issues with it. Not only taking advantage of licensing, discounts for that, but understanding what is out there and where the data is. Our security teams are looking at that all the time because they may not know it exists. And that's where the next one, where's the data stored and how is it used? Is there proprietary data? Is it sensitivity? Is there classifications for that? Who can see it? Who has it? Because security teams are looking at that all the time. We don't want our organizational data out in places that could be compromised. And what data is out there? Plus, we have all those security requirements behind those to back those up. And we have different inspections or certifications that we have to maintain. Now, access to the application, we can manage the access to the application quite easily through the portal. Like I said earlier, one of our biggest issues is we know how to add users to it. We sometimes forget a lot about taking away users from it. We've seen organizations out there where the users have been gone for, not just days, months, some cases years. They still have their access out there. Whether they're using it, we can see that. But the difference is you're still paying for that access. So one of the advantages of SaaS is reducing the cost of it. But if you don't take your users away from it, you're not going to get that advantage of cost. And then just because you give someone access to an application, are they actually using it? So tracking the usage of that application. Now, a lot of that is done internal to that application. They can tell you who's using it. Excuse me. and what they're doing. Some of these SaaS apps are based on user types, a standard user versus a premium user versus some other one for it. So we're looking at that. So that's why we can't tell that. That's why you need the usage data. But we're seeing a lot of these applications, and we'll use Office 365 as an easy one. We can monitor who's using it. If they're not using it, why do they have it? Obviously, in most cases, they're licensed because they're a user. But if they're not using certain aspects of it, maybe the level of Office 365 needs to go from an E5 to an E3 or to an E1 because they're not using it. Those are some of our challenges that we have to deal with. And you'll also see a challenge, or there's probably a poll question out there for you to answer here related to some of the challenges, because depending on how you're doing this, how are you going to manage it? Do you have a tool? Which tool are you using? How many tools are you using? That type of aspect of it. Okay, we'll go on to the next one here for Clayton, and we'll address the polling question as soon as we see it come at the results pop up.
Yeah, so obviously the next question is, once you decide to manage SaaS, how are you going to go about doing that? How are you going to identify the SaaS applications? Is that going to be something that we can import from certain things? We already have contracts, for example, contracts managed, for example, inside of a ServiceNow or another solution. And then what attributes do you need to capture to effectively manage a SaaS application? Obviously, you need to capture the contract. You need to capture duration, how the licensing is managed, how are you rolling out the licensing. But there's also a lot of other attributes that you need to capture as far as, who has access to the admin portal? What are those accounts, those passwords that you have to manage, in order to keep everything running smoothly? Do you have multiple environments? If ServiceNow, use that as another example, oftentimes you get two environments, just off the basic contract. But I've worked with a number of accounts where there's 6 or there's 10 different environments. And so how are you managing those? How are you ensuring what they're being used for from a development standpoint, all those types of things. But there's a lot of different attributes when it comes to actually managing your SaaS environments that you have to keep account of. Going down to a discovery perspective, where can we automate discovery? And this really works well in those hybrid models. And so when you do, we always go back to O365 because it's probably one of the most prevalent ones. But that's one where you can have the apps installed on your environment and still obviously move things up to their SharePoint cloud. And so that is an opportunity where we can use SCCM, or we can use a ServiceNow discovery, or we can use another tool, a JMF, for example, to go and bring that information to help augment, so we better understand the pervasiveness, or the usage at least, of how these applications are being used. But when we can't use a discovery, when we can't use an automated tool, ultimately we're going to have to go and get that data. In a perfect world, that SaaS solution is going to have an API. We're going to be able to query that API, through web services and bring that data into your SaaS management application. But that's not always going to be the case. It may be something where we have to do a download once a week or once a month, whatever makes sense for your organization, how dynamic your organization, and ultimately dictates, how fresh we have to keep the data. But at some solutions, we're at a point where we do have to do a manual import and then bring that data in and massage it and make sure we capture everything so that we can have oversight and we can have understanding of the SaaS applications in our landscape. Obviously, with ServiceNow and the software asset management solution, the ability to leverage dashboards that are already there, all the reporting capabilities, the spend analysis, trying to understand, so you have those quick snapshots so you can compare one solution versus another. You can see, what are we spending on AWS versus Google Cloud, for example? Are there certain advantages we have to making future decisions based upon those reports and that analysis, so that we hit certain benchmarks or set certain markers that we achieve, discounting, for example. All of those things play into how you manage your SaaS applications and how it most benefits your organization. And then the last one up here, performing periodic audits. And so again, your CMDB, your SaaS management, all these things, if the data is not accurate, if the data is not trusted, it's not going to be used, and then it's all for naught. And so you have to do things to validate the data to make sure that everything is, up to speed as far as where you are at, just to do those periodic audits so you understand, yes, with 99% certainty, this is our footprint today, this is where we're at. So we can make decisions as an organization. So you can make budgetary decisions, you can make financial decisions, you can explain to your CFO where these dollars are going.
And from the poll, it says that most everyone here, it says 100% here right now, had very limited tools that they're using to do SaaS. And in fact, in most cases, you have way too many tools and you don't know how to use them all, because most of the SaaS tools or the SaaS, applications will have portals for it. It's just who's managing it. Are we bringing that data in to a central side of this? So that's one of the issues, is which tools can do it? Are you managing it? Are you seeing this to take advantage of how to manage the SaaS, applications that are out there? So we're going to explain a little bit on what the ServiceNow side of it does and its functionality related to, how it manages SaaS. Now, there's other tools out there that can manage SaaS applications also. We're just picked this one to highlight on this one here. Now, typically in ServiceNow, under the SAM Pro, Software Asset Management Professional, they've got the functionality not only to manage normal licensing, but also the SaaS licensing. So we use that a lot of times just to tell us our entitlements. What do we own? Also, where are the portals out there so we can access it? And then once we set up the system, we can go out to the portals, from an integration aspect and pull in data from them. So we can see who has access to it by name, by the email, that type of setup. Also, within our SAM Pro, they're going to tell us from that, we can allocate those licenses to those users. Then you can see them in other reports in SAM Pro. That way you can know that Fred and Ginger are assigned or have this application allocated to them. But then you can also look to see Joey is gone. He's no longer an active person. Then why is he still allocated this license? So we can look at those. When we get to discovery for the installs, like I said, a lot of the SaaS apps are just web-based, so we don't have any installs, except for like Adobe, Microsoft. Those are the hybrid ones that they're actually installing software on the desktops or laptops for it. We can see that's discovered out there. So we need to be able to turn around and say, this application is discovered on this desktop. It's also part of Office 365. So they combine those. So you do not think that you have two different license needs. It's going to combine them because the licensing metric is per user. So that's one of those nice functionalities in here. We get license positions. How many do you own versus how many you have deployed out there? So we're always looking at that too. So you can see those within here. Usage data. This is always a tricky one because we're looking for typically what's installed on desktops. We can see usage on that through various tools. On the SaaS applications, if they're in the cloud-based, we need some other way to see the usage data. And so we can bring that data in. So that's where we have to look at those portals. Do they track the usage? And if so, what type of usage do they have out there? Because one of the nice things about Office 365, it does tell you everyone that's out there the last time they access it. Other applications don't do that in details. But from a SAM Pro perspective, we can integrate with most SAM, SaaS applications so we can get those information, whether it's, Office 365, Adobe, Box, Dropbox, DocuSign, Salesforce, Zoom, all of those various ones. So we can pull data in from them. So then you can see them inside of ServiceNow. So you get one picture from it. One of the other functions that they have in there is called spend analysis. The easy way to think of it is it's looking at your spend from your financial records type, and it's going to look for common things that are SaaS applications. And we see a lot of these finding Box or Adobe licenses that the business units bought that IT didn't know existed. So we're looking at those so we can bring that data in. That's where we find a lot of the obviously non-IT managed applications. And again, a bunch of those end up being personal, software versus business software, which causes a licensing issue on, we just can't automatically transfer them to a business because they're a personal license. So there's a lot of lost, revenue, or I should say expenses that we have to put in there for it. So we can't bring those in. Now, Clayton's going to show you, or we're going to show you some slides here, and Clayton's going to explain a little bit on inside of ServiceNow what we're actually seeing within the system. As soon as it clicks, there we go.
Yeah, and so we mentioned it a couple of slides ago. One of the benefits of using a SAM-based application like a ServiceNow, where they have their SAM Pro modules, is it does come with a lot of out-of-the-box portals and dashboards and abilities for you to have better visibility into your spend, into your license posture, into all these different things. And so you can see here on the left some of the different types of reports that are out there. And then on the right, an example of this, and keep in mind this is a demo environment, obviously, so we have limited amounts of data that we're using. But you can see different things. And again, it takes advantage of the ServiceNow platform. And so it takes advantage of the ability to drill into these different reports, these metrics, to understand where exactly do these, what comprises these numbers, how did we get here? We can slice and dice it down to different breakdowns, for example, so we can understand what applications, what SaaS applications are making up the largest portion of that. And if you go over to the next slide real quick, Doc, you also have the ability at the top there to select specific applications. And so here, this is more or less the exact same dashboard, but we're focused on Microsoft only right now. And so here we can see the number of subscriptions that we have assigned currently, how much is unused, all these different things. And you will have this ability with SAM Pro to go and do all this information, to have all this information at your fingertips on a SaaS solution by SaaS solution. So if you really want to quickly go and see Adobe, you go to your drop down, you switch it over to Adobe, and you can manage that. Instead of having to manage this by going to the Adobe administration portal and seeing the reports there, and then switching over and trying to figure out how do I log into the O365 portal, and then maybe you have to go to AWS and manage this, taking a lot of time to go and pull this information together. When you have it centrally managed, in a SaaS management solution like a ServiceNow, you have all these reports, and it's really easy to go and do comparisons, all these different things.
So that's where it comes into, how does it impact your organization? SaaS is out there, we know it's there. How do we manage it? Our big things are, we're going to try to control the spend, control the access, control our contracts and compliance, and if we're going to do chargebacks. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages. So we're trying to make sure that we get the advantages of it. So we want to know what SaaS environments are out there. Tools are in our environment, known versus the unknown. IT's managed versus the non-IT managed. And IT's okay usually with not managing everything. They just need to know that it exists so we can use that within the system. It also helps us manage the growth. We've seen, especially on mergers and acquisitions, where they will grow, they will move over there. They didn't realize that these other areas already had the SaaS applications. So they didn't budget for them because it was not a known entity for the IT team. So we'll do it. The other issue we always see is overlap of the applications. Now, this is where it comes into advantage for your processes. Do you have a category manager for certain applications? If so, they should see this overlap of applications, and their job one of their functions should be to turn around and say, why are we using multiple applications to do the same function? So they can reduce those. That's not just in SaaS, that's in all software. But we see a lot of this in SaaS because it's quick and it's easy, and someone used it before, so they know it gives them the answers they want. So they just acquire that SaaS license. We also have the issue with the security, loss of data, who has the data, making sure the right users have access to it, all of those. Those are things that we can control internally to the organization. What data is going out there, who has access. Remember, one of the biggest issues is we forget to remove people from Office 365 or from Adobe or Smartsheets or any of those other SaaS apps when they go away. The other issue we run into is, and this is not, in our control, it's breaches or attacks against the providers. Like when Microsoft gets attacked and their Office 365 goes down, or their Outlook goes down, or we have any of the other ones that are out there, big providers that do it. Zoom was one of the issues we had. Couldn't do Zoom meetings because Zoom was being attacked for another reason. We can't control those things. But the other thing that we want is downtime impacts. That also affects, we don't have access to these because of those breaches or attacks on them. We can't control if the provider is up or down. So hopefully they're managing it. That's their responsibility to do the backups, to do all of that failover, so they can take advantage of that. Big advantage of SaaS. But again, that's something that gets outside of the control of the organization that we have to live with. Now,
I will add though, Doc, when you leverage a ServiceNow, which is an IT service management solution, to as the same platform as you're managing your SaaS applications, the added benefit you get through that is you do have the ability to log incidents and then log them against those SaaS applications. And so you start to have that ability to track, so next time you're going into a contract renegotiation, and everybody likes to beat up Oracle. And so you can go back and you can say, hey, look, these are all the challenges we've had. And you've got them well documented. You don't have to go remember back. Oh, remember 2 years ago, I thought we had this major issue. We were down for days or whatever the case may be. But by leveraging that platform, by leveraging that engine that's already there, you're able to tie all these things together so that, again, you have better management of your SaaS applications. You have better awareness, which can help drive decisions going forward. Do we keep this provider? Do we shop around, look for somebody else? But managing those downtime impacts, understanding that, and then tying it back to your SaaS management is key to be able to make those decisions.
and that goes right there with the understanding the contracts and compliance. If you're having issues with them, you already know what your contracts, you're managing those, are you compliant with it? But as part of that, like Clayton said, if you're having issues with downtime or anything else, you can use those when you go back to do your renewals or your renegotiation of your SaaS contracts with it. Now you don't have to remember what happened. With tools like ServiceNow, you can go back and pull a report on all the different instances. And then, of course, if you're doing chargebacks or showback, we have a lot of organizations that they're going out to do Office 365 or Adobe or any of the other ones. They'll turn around and say, we're going to back charge that organization because it's going to be, $10 a month per user. How many users do you have? So that way they can reclaim that from an IT perspective. It's all budgeting, how it fits in with that budget for it. So there's a lot of impacts that go on out there. So we want to look at how do you handle the SaaS environment? What can you control and what don't you control? And how do you handle those? With that, one of the biggest things that we run into is you need to manage SaaS in one place. It makes it easier. So that way you're not looking at, we used 80 here because it's average of 80 applications out there per organization. I would not like to go to 80 different places to figure out if I'm compliant or not. I would rather see them in one place. So it makes it easier for us to manage it. We can control it, that type of setup. So we have to manage our SaaS environment so we get better visibility into it.
And so, Doc, we actually got one question there, and it's kind of open-ended. So I'll let you have your stab at it first. But it's, how long does it take to set this up? What's I guess what would be the reality based on your experience?
On this one, that's kind of a loaded question depending on what you're doing today. Meaning that if it's already out there and you're managing these, you can use that and you can set it up rather fast, especially if you've got a tool like ServiceNow or one of the other ones that the capability is already there. You just have to turn on the functionality. But typically, we're seeing from a SaaS product, from a program type perspective, we're seeing that's taken usually 3 to 6 months to set it up, because you're going to start with the biggest issues. You have to do your governance, that type of setup. And as you know, getting the processes down and your governances takes a while to get it through the system of your organization. But typically 3 to 6 months is a full, asset management, or including the SaaS program management.
Yeah, I would add on to that. It also depends, when we're talking about the shadow IT or the shadow SaaS, the other organizations, how effective are we going to be able to get access to these other parts of the organizations to at least have the discussion to understand, hey, what are you guys using today? Is there anything we're not aware of? And having that culture so that we can bring that together. That's also going to help drive the speed to which you're able to get that complete, robust picture. But it's going to be an incremental improvement as you add on more SaaS solutions to your SaaS management solution. You're going to drive more and more impact. You're going to be able to drive more and more overall ROI or benefit to your organization.
So the big call to action is understand what your SaaS environment is, your landscape. What are you using out there? And it's not only IT. We always, as IT, we always concentrate on IT, but our business units out there use a lot of SaaS thing, and shadow IT or not, we need to understand what's out there. And then how do you manage each of those different solutions that they're using out there? How do they control access to them? This is all part of your software asset management program, because it's one big setup there for it.
And then another question real quick, Doc, is SAM Pro required with ServiceNow?
SAM Pro is preferred. You can do some aspects of SaaS management without SAM Pro, but it's going to be very limited, because obviously the SAM Pro is tuned to manage software licenses, including the SaaS type of licenses for it. But you can get some management done without it.
Yeah, I would add that obviously you're getting the dashboards, you're getting the portals, you're getting that look and feel, the analytics, all those KPIs are coming with the SAM Pro. It doesn't mean that SAM Pro has everything. There's still things we're doing to augment SAM Pro, to capture all the different portals that you're managing access to, the different environments, things along those lines. So there is some additional tweaking or additional work that needs done on top of the SAM Pro offering, but it gets you the bulk of the way there and gives you a huge head start, in my opinion.
And I see a question here coming on. How do you find all of these rogue SaaS environments out there? One of the ways that we look at those, we work with our security teams a lot of times, because there's standard URLs that, like Office 365 will go to, or Adobe, or Smartsheets. We can look at those to see those common URLs. If they're using those, obviously it's probably a SaaS environment. Other aspects is, if you're using ServiceNow, you got spend analysis. It's going to be looking for that spend, from the finance side of it, going to those particular vendors. And then one of the things that we use a lot is if you have an application review process, when they come in, that's where you're going to hear about new applications. And then you can identify which ones are SaaS, who's doing them, which team supports it. So we see those because we know they're in the environment. It is just how many and how do we capture as much data on those so we can support them and better manage them. You get any of the questions over there, Clayton?
I don't have any more at the moment, Doc. I'll give everybody a second here in case they want to throw anything. There's a Q&A section. Obviously, a couple of you have found it, but if anybody else has any questions, feel free. While we have a few minutes remaining here.
Yeah, and gentlemen, both Doc and Clayton, thanks so much for this. And while we're wrapping, just a reminder to everybody on here, we do these monthly. If you're interested in this particular topic and would love to get some time, a call with Doc or Clayton or any of our team, just feel free to reach out. You can reply to the invite that you have. We're happy to follow up. So if you're a CDW customer, you've got access to resources like Doc and Clayton. Could be just brainstorming. It could be ideas. And certainly other areas of not only the ServiceNow platform, but process improvement too. So, don't hesitate to reach out. Also, ideas for future sessions. If you're interested in any particular topics, let us know as well. So, Doc and Clayton, unless you guys see any additional questions, I think we'll just wrap things up. Thank everybody for joining, and look forward to follow up and getting a chance to chat individually with any of the organizations or folks that joined us today. So thank you so much.